So, hi, good morning. A little bit different. I've not fussed too much with the Corona key or the green screen at the back of me. I just really wanted to do this video just to show you guys or give you guys a bit of information on how to produce electricity, possibly in a bug out situation. Now, I've got quite a few things here in front of me which I'm going to get through in this video, but I suppose before we do, let's thank those people that are supporting the observatory. The reason I've afforded myself this little bit of time today is because there's not a lot of data coming in at the moment. We're a couple of days, about 5 days away from doing the TriMag system, getting the data out of that, and the magnetosphere. And who knows, in the next few days we might have a couple of packets of data coming from some of the locations of our substations around the world. So, as I've been talking about in the last couple of videos, you know, we really need to, at this point in time, start considering how we are going to produce electricity. Might be a good time for you guys right now. If you want, go and grab a coffee. This video probably is going to be a little bit lengthy, and that's because I want to show you quite a few things there and talk about how to generate power, possibly off grid, or maybe in the future a way forward of producing electricity off grid. And I said the other day that we probably need a fuel mix, and what I mean by that is more than one method of producing electricity. If you look at the way millionaires make their money, they don't usually have all their eggs in one basket. So if like one of their business or one of their parts of business goes bankrupt, they've got a couple of others to fall back on. And I think that that is the case with energy as well. I think that you need more than one aspect. And of course, our major power companies, as you can see down there in the chart, have more than one way of producing electricity. Trying to work out electricity bills is really complex because, you know, you can have peak times, and peak times you charge more for, say, natural gas as opposed to wind generation and solar power or coal or nuclear, because at that point of peak, when everybody's drawing electricity out of the system, they have to incorporate other methods to put that energy into it. So they could be relying just now on nuclear, but when the peak part of the rush hour comes in, you know, everybody starts coming home from work and hitting the kettle. It's the first thing they want to do, make a nice coffee, I suppose, after the day's work. You know, the energy demand is going to go up, and they charge you extra for that. But to try and work that out on your electricity bill, it's really difficult. So I just wanted to go over probably about 10 years of building various models with you. Some of these claim to be the new way forward for us to generate electricity, but what I will say is that they are all capable, or some of these models which I'm about to show you are capable of producing electricity, but they're not going to meet our demands. And I will say this from the get-go of this: if you're in a grid down situation, the best suggestion I've got for you is use less. So, you know, if your life revolves around your laptop, and let's say there is no internet at that point in time, you know, you're probably going to just using your laptop for some of the information that you've stored on it for a given situation. I don't know whether the phones will be working very long in a grid down situation. I'm sure, you know, when everyone realises there's no power, you know, there's going to be a big demand, probably overwhelm the system, and that will go down as well. And if it's a grid down situation, there's going to be no power to run the repeater cells all across the country, so your phones probably aren't going to work, your laptop's not going to work because there's no internet. You know, these are things that we need to start thinking about, because we are getting closer to situations which could cause this. And just recently we've had the pandemic, which has not really put too much demand on these resources, although we may not realise that, but there is the threat of a cyber attack bringing down the global system of electronics. And there is also, you know, a real threat of solar flares. We are overdue one of those. We are going through a magnetic reversal, and let's face it, I'm pretty sure you're aware of all the different scenarios that can cause that grid down scenario for you, and that means no power in your home. So, as you can see from the grid, wind generation, solar power, natural gas, geothermal, then you've got coal power plants, nuclear power plants, and others as well. There's other sources of those. And over the years, I've spent probably 10-15 years trying to come up with alternative ways of creating electricity. I just want to go through a few, some of them that you'll know, like solar panel, photovoltaic cells is a good way, but then at the night time, if you don't store that power onto batteries, you know, you're going to have trouble. So photovoltaic is a good way of renewable energy. After the initial cost of the solar panel, the photovoltaic panel, you know, you're going to be able to create electricity enough to do on a small scale. I mean, I've got these portable solar panels where you can just open them up. It's only about 14 watts, but it's enough to charge a mobile phone, maybe a laptop, maybe a walkie-talkie or something like that. You know, I have spent a lot of time on the internet. I'll just show you some of these simple motors that you can build, you know, using neodymium magnets. Some of the ideas that people have had on there, where you use a motor to power another motor, one's weaker than the other, and you can get the power to run. So it's like, you know, push me pull you motor. You know, they're both connected. One is connected to the power source, it drives the other as a generator, and in turn lights up all the LEDs on there. Another one which you'll be familiar with is the Bedini motor, which uses two coils in one, or two strands of wire wrapped around a coil, and is connected to a microprocessor or something like that, that when it detects the magnetic field, it induces the current into the transistor, which then gives you some power from a battery to flick the motor over. It's just another way, but there are lots of ways of skinning the rat. I mean, this is probably one of the most simplest forms of motors you can get. Basically a magnet with a north and south pole on either end. It's just a stack of neodymium magnets and a coil of wire, and when you connect the power to these tinfoil strips, you know, this rotates and creates momentum. But if you was to just turn this in the field of the magnet, you'd create electricity. So you could have this attached to, you know, some blades which would turn in the wind, and you'd produce your own electricity with that. You can use a CPU fan and just spin the CPU fan and generate electricity via that. It's just a simple form of wind generation. Another one, you know, I've tried, this was something I built a long time ago. It's a steam generator, basically. It's also like a hybrid generator, because it's got neodymium magnets in the top, which is pushing the crank down in the motor. So we're using steam to flick the wheel round, and in turn it would drive off that wheel there a generator, so you could produce electricity. And you know, all you'd need for that, I suppose, would be a kettle with a pipe connected to it to push the steam into it. And so long as you was creating steam, that would keep turning over like an old-fashioned steam engine. You know, just another example. Another example that we're going to come across, you know, with a lot of these devices, is what I call the magnetic gate. And if I can try and show you what the magnetic gate is, it's like if you've got a magnet here. Right, I'll hold the magnet to the side of the stick. You see that there? That momentum? This is probably one of the biggest problems with all, you know, these ideas on the internet claiming that magnets will turn, you know, perpetually a device and create electricity. Doesn't work. And you know, I've tried lots of them. Again, this is a good example of a V-gate motor that doesn't work because of the same principle. And I tried various different cams. As you can see, it's like a wishbone, this one here, that has a magnet over there to try and overcome the problem, but you can see they don't work. Another one is similar to, natural gas power plants, would be the the H2O generator. So you connect a positive here and a negative to that. You fill this cell up with water. Inside there is a load of washers. This one's really old now, and as you can see, it's gone rusty, but it did produce hydrogen and oxygen. Now together the mix is explosive, but you can separate them so that you burn the hydrogen at the rate of oxygen that you choose, and you could do that probably with some flyback valves in a tube, so that, you know, there's no ignition going back down the pipe, and you could create your own gas, which in turn you could cook on, or you could use to run a small generator. I'm not saying that this particular tiny one would run a small generator, but if you look at some of the H2O generators on the internet, YouTube, you will come across, you know, some relatively good ones that produce good quantities of litres of hydrogen and oxygen, and burned at the correct rate, it doesn't explode and would run your generator. Another one at Linsky or wherever his name was, built something like this at Coral Castle. This is something that I recreated. I'll tell you about this. It's quite strange what I did find, and perhaps when I get time I'll go back to, you know, just exploring why it was happening. I had some neodymium magnets as this was rotating quite quick, and when the neodymium magnet come in contact with all these other magnets, it made a noise which I thought was really unusual, like a squealing noise. And I didn't look into it any more than that, but I just found it very interesting that, you know, when two magnets come into connection with each other, that they would produce a squealing noise. So I found that a little bit, you know, interesting. Maybe I'll go back and have a look at it at another point. What else have we got here? Another way of producing electricity, you may not know it, is with a Peltier element. And I got a good idea for this. I was going to test it, and basically what happens is, if you plug this into the electric, positive and negative, this one side of this Peltier will go freezing cold. If you've been watching the clay generation progression videos that we're building a clay generator out of these, using, you know, about 18 of these, and we've got the temperature down there to about -37, which is good enough to condense alcohol on, you know, we can then see the cosmic rays going through the chamber. But if you heat this up, it will light LEDs and produce electricity. And there are some good examples on YouTube of where people have built Peltier generators. And my idea was for this is to get a stack of these, surround them in some fireproof cement, and just be able to throw it into a fire, because I think that would be a perfect way of generating light. You know, you could have it connected to a bank of LEDs. You just throw the fire brick with Peltier elements into any fire, and it will get hot and start producing electricity. I'm not sure at what point it would break down, whether it would continue running, but I'm sure with today's technology, you know, we could do something on that principle. I don't think it would cost too much to do. I don't think it would take too much to develop it, but I think it could work. And I'm just thinking about something really simple, like, you know, if it's a grid down situation, you just throw Peltier brick into the fire and it will charge your phone or run some lights. Couldn't be any simpler than that. A lot of these devices here that we've looked at so far, producing electricity, like wind, solar, gas, are all great, but the problem is, you know, it's at the point of demand when you need them, and because of that, you know, they have to be stored on batteries, a lot of the energy that you collect off these devices. Now, as you can see, the energy companies are using a fuel mix, and I think that the way forward for us is to also use a fuel mix, perhaps a generator and a means of you creating your own gas to run the generator. I know it sounds really complex, but you know, you've got the time now, you've probably got 12 months, and I guarantee you, if you invested a lot of that time into creating your own energy off-grid, you'd be able to, in 12 months, or even less, depending on how skilled you are with a few hand tools, be able to produce your own electricity. And that just depends on what quantity of electricity you would like. And that's why I say at the beginning of this video, you know, I think that the way forward is use as little as possible, and you know, you'll get by a lot easier. If you're just trying to run washing machines and cookers, you know, you really are pushing the demand up there, and obviously, you know, you're going to need a lot of wind power, a lot of solar power. You're going to need batteries to store that power. I don't think that that's probably for a lot of us, you know, the way forward, especially with the price of batteries to store this quantity of electricity. You want, like, you know, you want to put a 30 amp drop on your power batteries. You know, then 30 amps is a lot of electricity to produce off grid to do that. And let's just say 30 amps would be your electric cooker in your kitchen or something. If you've got a big gas generator, that's fine. But if you haven't, and you haven't got you know, 10 or 15,000 pounds to invest in, you know, off grid, you know, power. The other problem is, even if you have got that money, where you're going to get your next refill of gas to run the generator or fuel? So you're limited by time, and we don't know how long it could be before they all got round to repairing all these transformers. We know that they don't have a warehouse sitting somewhere with these transformers just in case. So just like we've seen with this pandemic this year, with the PPE, the demand would rush in, and you're either going to then overorder like we did in the UK. Apparently we've got warehouses now with PPE stockpiled up, and we're even using warehouses in China, and because of that we're blocking the warehouses for car companies not being able to get their daily demand of car parts so that they can build cars. So all sorts of problems can evolve in a short period of time with a crisis. I've got to say this, I've said it many times before, but before we do, I think before we just end on the note of electricity and power consumption and power generation, basically it all comes down to a couple of things. If you've got coils like this is a coil out of a relay, out of a car that's been stripped down just to its basic principles. I can pull out that pin so you can see it is a coil. You should be able to see the hole all the way through it. And if you've got a coil and a magnet, and if you pass the magnet over the coil, it will generate electricity. It's as simple as that. And you've seen in these examples how easy it is to build, a motor or a generator. It's very simple, in its simplest possible terms. I mean, look at that. I'm pretty sure that we could all scavenge some copper wire from somewhere, create an axle for it to rotate, and find some magnets that we could use, and all we've got to do at that point is get it to rotate. So in principle all you need is a coil and a magnet, and if you have more of these you can create more electricity. It's as simple as that. But every one of us I think is capable of creating a little bit of electricity with some of the methods that I've shown, or maybe some of the others on the internet. I want to talk about something else now, important. A lot of people think that they are looking after themselves right now. They've got their own little patch of food they're growing. They've got their own method of generating electricity, and if it needed to be the case, they could support themselves. My biggest concern with this is that we have a problem where 96% of the population of this planet, 96% of 7 billion people, haven't got those things already sorted and cannot take care of themselves. And I think that this is a big problem, because for a lot of us that have got these things, we're soon going to be in a situation, if any of these things did happen overnight, we would be targets for everybody else, for the other 97-8% of the population of this earth, which would be a big problem for you if you've got food in your garden that you grow. Have you ever seen the films Grid Down? Just gives you an idea of when the electricity fails across a country, how people react, and within a couple of weeks we saw them almost killing each other in those two films. One was in America and one was based in the UK, and you only have to ask the question, why was these films ever created in the first place? I think it was to give you an idea of what you would be faced with. And I've said this before, your eyes are in the front of your head, and that makes you a predator. That makes all the people, all the human beings on this planet, predators. And we have seen within the last 100 years, guys, behaviour that you would not believe could come about just through scenarios coming up, like a food blockade in St. Petersburg during the Second World War. Over 2,000 people arrested within the year for cannibalism, and 100,000 people or more dying for being attacked over food rations. That's the true behaviour of people in a situation like this. And I know people think, oh, I've got my AK-47 rifle or my nasty boy shotgun, and I'm going to be able to look after myself and my family. I just don't think people really have really deeply thought about what would happen. Even these small communities of people where everybody's armed, I don't even think that they could comprehend what could happen when people by the hundreds of thousands are starving and they know you have resources. They will kill you, your family and your community for them. I've always took the idea to be very lightweight and portable, and fit in like a ghost amongst everybody else. And I think that in this situation you can survive probably 2 or 3 months. There'll be a lot of people that already have passed away in that situation where they've scavenged what they can. I mean, you can imagine it, can't you? They're going to go straight out to the farms because they know that there's cattle on there they can eat, and yeah, they'll defecate the farm within days of its stock. And then what? The only reason we've got regular supplies of food coming in is because people aren't going out to the farmers already and destroying their cattle in one go. It's reared, it's bred, and it means that there's a supply for next time. We learned this many thousands of years ago, how to rear animals. It stopped us having to spend so much time hunting and gathering out there in the field. And we are seeing this already in the UK. And herd hustling, you might think, is something of the past, but no, herd hustling is rife in the country. In Warwickshire, where I live, the police force have set up a command centre to tackle this growing problem. Farmers are having the cattle slaughtered on the fields, cows, sheep. All the waste is being left, and all the prime cuts of meat is being taken off the field. And this is happening in 2020, and it's on the increase. And farmers are already under a lot of pressure with trying to keep their heads above water with all what else has been going on. I mean, some might have a mixture of farming. They might have cows, sheep, a couple of pigs, and for themselves, maybe for selling, maybe 1 or 2, and then crops. But if the crops fail and the farmer starts losing his cattle, it starts to threaten his livelihood, and in turn affects the supply in the food chain. So we're facing a lot of problems, not just providing electricity and energy for our needs, but also for the demand of food. Now, I think it would be important for us all to have the ability to, if not produce our own, buy our own different sources of electricity. I just want to put that out there. Just don't rely on one. That's the main thing. Follow what these big companies are doing that provide a lot of the countries in your country. Follow the method. They don't just have one source. So that if one source does fail, it's not, say, like wind, no wind blowing today, but there is sun, you've got solar panels to back up. If there's no solar panels and no wind, and you need to create electricity in an emergency, then maybe kick up your generator. Have a little bit of fuel put away for that. There's hydro if you live by rivers. There's wind if you're out in the open. Wind will work pretty much everywhere. On a good day, you do get a couple of gusts of wind that will put a bit of juice into the battery. There's solar panels. There is coal, and therefore, you need a way of converting the coal into electricity. So maybe using an old-fashioned steam engine might be the way forward for you to produce that electricity. Steam engines are prehistoric, really, but they still work. They still can produce electricity, and they're very simple engines. And you know what? You can pick up these relatively cheap. And let's face it, there is always a supply of wood or something for you to burn that can get that steam engine going. As long as you've got a bit of water to turn into steam and some wood to burn, and you've got a generator connected to your steam engine, you're in business. I can't think of any better and more prehistoric way of producing electricity than steam engine. Hydro's good, but not many of us live by rivers. You're not going to create vast quantities of hydropower. I have seen where they're using, it's just moderate gravity drops through guttering, I suppose 8-inch pipes, forcing it into, as it drops, about 15 foot down the pipe into your turbines, which drive your water impeller on your hydro turbine. It will produce electricity. So if you live in that vicinity of a water where you've got a little bit of a drop on the water, you can produce good quantity of electricity freely. We can produce free electricity, there's no doubt about that, but there is problems with all of them, I think you'll agree. Some days the sun don't shine as bright as others, and therefore the power that you produce with your solar panels isn't going to be adequate. But if you've got a wind generator added to that system, it will help. If you can create your own hydrogen gas, you can run that through a generator. You've just got to be careful with it, because hydrogen gas is explosive. I mean, let's face it, that is what runs rocket engines. If you've got a steam engine, you can acquire small steam engines. You've only got to put a DC motor on that steam engine. It will turn the DC motor around into a generator for you. You'll be able to create your electricity. And maybe a couple of batteries wouldn't be a bad thing. And you don't have to invest a lot of money in batteries. If you do a bit of research on your batteries, they're going to be short term. Let's face it, if the grid's gone down, it could be years before you get electricity back to your property. If the grid down doesn't cause total catastrophic failure of any continuity of government in your country. If that breaks down, we go back into the dark ages for sure. And of course there is Peltier elements we can use. Again, if you've got a fire and you develop this into a fire brick, you can just throw that into the fire and create some electricity that way. The two main things are food and electricity. I think for food you need to be a little bit more skilled at knowing how to catch food, a bit more hunter-gathering. You see, this is the thing that they've not taught our kids at school. Can you believe it? The difference between human beings today and every other species on our planet is that every other species still knows how to go about getting its food if it needs to. We are probably one of the only species that if we took a handful of children out of school now and put them in the wilderness, they wouldn't know how to light a fire. If you ask some kids, and this has been the case in the UK, where milk comes from, they'll say the supermarket. And pretty much it does, doesn't it? They don't know that it comes from a cow. And they wouldn't know how to milk it. They wouldn't know how to process that milk into butter or cheese, or even into drinkable milk. They wouldn't know how to do it. So we've failed really, this generation, perhaps the generation before it, in the basic skills and knowledge that they need. And I know some parents say, well, we take them to Boy Scouts or Guild Guides and they do all the sort of fire building skills and stuff like that, but such a small number of that generation know how to do that, and the rest of them don't. So we have really put ourselves as a species in a vulnerability, and we can see now clearly that we're probably a couple of years, or 3 years at the most, maybe 2.6 years away from a magnetic reversal on this planet, and that's going to cause more trouble than what this pandemic has already. And we face already from these big organisations the threat of cyber attacks now, with our infrastructure reliant so much on technology. If that is the case, and these cyber attacks do bring down the system, can you imagine power plants that can't run their actuation systems, which are commanded by computers? Can you imagine a nuclear power plant losing control of its systems? What then controls the fuel rods that go in and out the reactor at that point? These things are safe as long as they're being maintained correctly, and they are very, very fine-tuned. But when things go wrong, we have disasters like Fukushima, which is still ongoing, still spewing radioactive waste into the ocean there. People are still eating the fish that are caught around them seas, and the rates of radiation and death caused by that are known in that vicinity to those people. So we face a lot of problems, and what I wanted to do is encourage you guys to start thinking about some of these problems, because they are coming round, and soon will be, you know, knocking on our door. And we need to be prepared for some of these things. We need to, you know, really realistically think about, you know, all the other people in this world that are not skilled and ready for a situation. And we've seen many of them fold just under this pandemic that we've seen, not be able to cope. And it's mainly, I know that it's mainly because of the financial stress that this has caused. But, you know, the financial stress will come with pretty many scenarios that we could be looking at in the future. And, you know, we really need to start thinking about these things on a serious level. You know, I'm always going to be interested in that quest for, you know, power consumption that does work. And it might include, like I've mentioned, more than one fuel mix. You know, we might have to incorporate a bit of battery power at some point, some gas, some Peltier heat, elemented electricity generations. It might include a little bit of wind power. But, you know, the system I can see would work using a multitude of methods of creating electricity. And some of us are in a better position than others to incorporate more of those into their system. Like if they live by a river, then you could incorporate a little bit of hydro generation for yourselves. So, you know, I think that'll do this video, guys. The only other thing is, yeah, it is one of the worst times for our observatory. I know this is a bit of a different subject. I think it's an important subject to talk about. You know, I'm interested in your views down there. If I've missed out any power productive methods, then please, you know, put them in the description down there. But the other main thing is that we keep our observatory funded. You know, all this knowledge is valuable to some people. You know, some people really want to know what's going on with their world. And, you know, it's really sad when I look at the Earth Health at a glance that we do every week and see the level of people that are interested in that, as opposed to talking about just the one subject of geomagnetic reversal. You know, I think to myself, you know, do they understand, you know, where we are right now? And, you know, our Earth that we've taken advantage of for so long, it is a big screaming, crying shame. You know, without the atmosphere, we're dead. Without the magnetic protection of the magnetosphere, we're dead. And, you know, look at where we've put ourselves now. You know, for some people, without electricity, they're dead. Can you believe that? This is the world we're living in now. We've made ourselves so vulnerable through relying so heavily on the technology that we've got, that this is where we stand in 2020. Unbelievable, you know. So yeah, main thing is, I suppose, is that we keep the observatory funded. That way we can keep people informed, and, you know, we can try and encourage a few more people out there to take a little bit of notice of what's going on in their world, and, you know, the current climates that we all face in general. So I ain't going to go on anymore. You enjoy your Saturday, guys. I'll be back in the week with at least the Trimag data, and we'll have a look at the latest position of the magnetic north pole currently, as well as the magnetosphere in general. So links down there. Support us. It's one of the hardest times of the year for the observatory, and we need support. Okay, guys. As always, bye for now.